In Duval County, in Jacksonville, Florida, Paul Dixon, convicted for life at the age of 17 for murder and armed robbery, will get his hands on one of the most vicious and disgusting human beings, convicted child molester David Ramirez, where for over 3 hours, he would beat him and ultimately drown him in the swirly of death in the Jacksonville County Jail toilet. Both men were at the county jail on appeal, as both were serving life sentences at the time. As stated before, Dixon doing life at the age of 17, and the Chomo Ramirez for one of the most vicious molestations of an 11-year-old girl. Dixon's whole fight in Florida is that juveniles cannot be sentenced to natural life due to the lack of the frontal lobe development. On the other hand, the Chomo Ramirez, who was drowned in the toilet, was there on appeal, but not because he was innocent. You see these snakes, they shed their skin and become bigger snakes. They know that when they go for appeal for whatever they did to these kids, to these women, a lot of times they don't want to relive that. They get off on that. It's a last sense of control and power. So they'll take 20, 30 years off the Chomo sentence as a way to not get the children back in the case. People have moved on with their life. They don't want to relive it. And the prosecutor's scared that they'll lose it. So when they get put in the local county jail, like Ramirez did, a lot of times they don't make it out. As Ramirez had begged for his life, stating, "Do not put me in this cell with him. Put me in my protective custody unit." Yet it's unknown if he gave the same mercy to those children. Hopefully, they can sleep better at night. Let's get into it. Paul Dixon, a convicted murderer serving a life sentence, brutally killed David Ramirez, a convicted child molester, at the Duval County Jail in July 2019. The attack was not random, but appeared to be driven by revenge, with Dixon having a personal connection to one of Ramirez's victims. Before the attack, Ramirez had begged prison officials to not be placed in the same cell as Dixon, knowing that Dixon was a dangerous individual with a violent history. Ramirez, the Chomo, was well aware that Dixon would likely kill him due to his criminal past as a child molester. In fact, it is documented that Ramirez told the officers, "Do not put me in here. He will kill me." Despite his pleas, the officers ignored his warnings and placed Ramirez in the cell with Dixon, which led to the deadly confrontation. Despite the risk of facing additional charges for his actions, Dixon did not hesitate to act on his anger, clearly seeking retribution for the crimes committed by Ramirez. Once in the cell, Dixon began brutally beating Ramirez. The attack lasted for over an hour, with Dixon savagely punching and kicking Ramirez, even putting his teeth through his mouth during the beating. Dixon's violence was not simply a spontaneous outburst, but a calculated act of vengeance. After breaking Ramirez's bones and knocking out his teeth, Dixon forced Ramirez's face into a toilet, holding it there until Ramirez drowned. Ramirez was found dead in his cell on the morning of July 30th, after he had been subjected to the violent attack. Further documented, Ramirez and Dixon had been locked in the cell for over 3 hours before the authorities were finally alerted. During this time, Dixon relentlessly attacked his cellmate, leading to the fatal outcome. Dixon would decline to speak to the homicide detectives and request an attorney. Paul Dixon was rebooked late Tuesday night on a new murder charge for drowning the Chomo in the toilet. Dixon had been brought back to the Duval County Jail from another facility for court proceedings for a new sentencing hearing while serving a life term for a murder that occurred March 29th, 1993, according to the Florida Department of Corrections. He was 17 at the time of the murder, but new laws require resentencing for juveniles given life terms. Paul Dixon also appeared in an episode of the series When Kids Kill, which documents cases involving juveniles committing serious crimes. In an additional statement, the Chomo was pronounced dead, and that the police are now reviewing the prison surveillance cameras. Dixon, who has been in prison since the age of 17, allegedly pushed Ramirez's head into the toilet water until he died. A third prisoner who witnessed the incident is refusing to cooperate with the authorities. And that's it. You hurt kids, 11-year-old little girl. Now, I added a little bit of the news clippings to show you how sick these motherfuckers really are. You see, these Chomos always will continuously hurt children, women, and vulnerable people while playing the victim. In the attached video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, as he was begging for his life and his lawyer made him sound like he was the victim, and his family never once said anything about the victims. And he was willing, even though he was guilty in one of the most heinous molestations of an 11-year-old girl in the county's history, he knew that if he went there, subpoenaed the victims, subpoenaed the witnesses, they didn't want to go through that again. The parents didn't want to go through that again. And a lot of times, when that happens, the parents will reach out to a cellmate, an officer, a friend of the family, and say, please don't let my family go through this again. And sometimes people slip, fall, and drown in toilets. At the end of the day, you hurt kids, you're gonna be locked in a cell for 3 hours with a man that's been in prison his whole life and has a chance to go home. However, what you did to those children outweighs anything and everything. Like I said, those parents, they don't want their kids to go through that, relive that. Are you serious? You're gonna put them all through that? It's not gonna happen. Paul Dixon was 17 when he entered the Department of Corrections. He knows that feeling. When he sees that man there, who's a weasel, he's in prison begging for protective custody, begging and hiding and running from grown men that will actually fight back and break his shit and put him in a toilet and give him that swirly of death. But he still has to subpoena the victims. He still has to do it. And he knows he'll never go home, but it was one final effort to get maybe 20 years off his life sentence. He still probably would never go home. But that pain and suffering is like a thrill for these piece of shits, these demonic, evil motherfuckers. Yet, all the dirt, all the evil he did, his last breath was of a shitty toilet bowl in a county jail. And there's surveillance cameras to watch the inmates 24/7 in these high custody wings. And they're gonna evaluate them for evidence, which means there's nothing on that fucking video. It's over. Game over. You hurt children, rape, pedophile shit. This is what it is. This is one of many that I'm gonna post on here of these incidents where inmates that hurt children are drowned in toilets brutally for hours and hours. And for some reason, the cameras don't work. Stay out, stay free. Us.
Michael Bosson was Ramirez's attorney over the past 2 years for the appeal process. He learned his client was killed yesterday afternoon.
Sex crimes are, it's kind of a sensitive nature, and I don't know if that was the motive behind it, but a lot of times those individuals get treated pretty poorly by inmates.
Bosson says despite the crime his client was convicted of, inmates still have basic rights to be protected, and Ramirez's loved ones are upset about what happened.